We are in Bristol today with the Independence, with the limited edition. We are kindly hosted by Nicholas from Fairs, and we are discovering their amazing new headquarters. But more importantly, perhaps we are digging into their history, the legacy, and what Nicholas is doing to make Fairs, the glorious company that Fairs has been in the past and will surely be on the way forward. Nice to see you, Nicholas. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you very much for coming to Bristol. It's lovely to be able to host you in our headquarters. For many years, we didn't have a headquarters. It was me working from home. So it's nice to actually be able to show this off to you.
Of course, of course. And your headquarters is not just anywhere. It's in the center of England, which was the center of watchmaking for so many years. And you are on this multitasking endeavor of not only revamp Fairs watches, but also making part of the British legacy relevant again, and you're going places with that plan.
Well, thank you. I'm trying, certainly. But yeah, I think for me, it's many things that I'm trying to do. You know, for me, it is about bringing my family's watch company back to life, and not just bringing it back and saying, well, we launched a watch, but going, no, actually 7 years on, we've brought many collections to life. But it's also looking at British watches and the British watch industry and what part we can play in that. We're one of the oldest watch companies in Britain. And yes, we closed for 39 years, but we've now been back open 7. And so it's saying, well, how does that help on the international stage to be showing the British story of watchmaking today? People know about what happened in the past. Britain is very good at talking about the past and what's happened, but I'm always interested in the future. Like, what's coming down the line? What can the British industry look like in 10, 15, 20 years' time? And what influence I can help on that.
Absolutely. And you do that with a vision and a mix between what made English watchmaking relevant and how you see Fairs translating the contemporary touch that you want to give, starting from the piece that you're wearing today. And
absolutely. So today I'm wearing the Brunswick 40 copper salmon. So this is in our 40mm, slightly sportier case, the more of one watch to wear from beach to boardroom, as we say, but with a copper salmon dial. And of course, salmon dials can be very divisive. Some people prefer it to be very pink, some people prefer it to be more red. For us, we've gone for a dial that really has that copper element. The dial is coated in copper and 18 karat red gold. And so when you see it, it's got a warmth, a metallic warmth that is those metals coming through. Absolutely,
and it embodies that transition that we were talking about, like the piece I'm wearing today, for example, the Brunswick Aurora. That transition between mixing elements from the past with your own vision of how watchmaking should look today, and you do that using the details with the materials, the way you do things. What is that you're most proud of how Fairs looks today compared to what it was in the past?
Certainly. I think, if I go back 7 years for a moment, I had a big decision to make when I restarted the company. Did we want to go down a line of just recreating watches from the archive? If you go back 7 years, vintage reintroductions, very, very popular. That would have been a very safe, easy route.
And you have a big archive.
Exactly.
Plenty of ideas you could dig from. Yeah?
You look at that and you go, right, that's the next 20 years of launches sorted. Just pick a watch out at random, recreate it and, and sit back. But I wanted to do something a bit more difficult. I wanted to do something where I said, actually, because this is a family business, because I'm the 4th managing director, I'm the great-great-great-grandson of the founder, there's this continuity, there is this link. What if we imagine Fairs hadn't closed in 1976? So there was no big restart in 2016. What if the business had kept going? What would it be making today? And to do that, you go back into the archive, you do have to look at the archive, and you go, I'm not going to look at specific models, I'm going to look at multiple models and pull from it what are the consistent design elements. And one of the first things I noticed was overall, Fairs always made very elegant watches. They weren't very shouty. Even in the 70s, they were pretty tame for the 70s. And so I said, right, that's going to be our big focus, elegance. And our registered tagline is, our motto that everyone lives by in this office is elegantly understated since 1846. And it's this very British idea of understatement. You know, we don't need to shout. We don't actually put the 1846 founding year anywhere on the watch. A lot of brands would. They'd be shouting it from the rooftops. Whereas I go, we are a British watch company with heritage.
Absolutely, and the elegantly understated is really personalized by you as a character representing the brand, I find, and the environment that you decided to be working from with your staff here. And I think that comes out very clearly. What do you think? I mean, at the times of your ancestors, watches were useful, functional.
Of course, yes,
objects.
they were tools.
They were tools for the daily life. It was obviously, they were technological tools, of course. Today this has changed for as much as you're very proud of the level of accuracy, how solid of a quality you can propose. From the point of view of what FIRS is offering today compared to the past, what are the achievements you're most proud of in terms of technical details, engineering, designing? You mentioned it.
Certainly. So I think, yes, if we're honest, is a watch a required tool? No, we all carry a phone that has the time. The time is everywhere. I've always been a strong believer since I started wearing watches as a kid. When I was at Rolex, I would say to people all the time, actually wearing a watch in the 21st century is incredibly useful because quite often our hands are filled with things. You want to glance at the time, you just flick of your wrist. You haven't got to take the watch out. Our
That's
phones,
underrated, actually.
Yes, I mean, if you think of it, an iPhone 14 is effectively a 21st century pocket watch because it's in your pocket and you have to take it out to tell the time. That's why the wristwatch took over so quickly.
And
now,
obviously, the iPhone is already too often in our hands. So
exactly,
actually,
exactly. When I look at a watch, it's actually, people increasingly are talking about how do you disconnect. For example, on Sundays, my phone is always turned off. I have one day a week, complete, no digital. But I still know what time it is. I know what time I'm going to brunch, when I need to prepare dinner because of the watch. Now, with that in mind, when I'm looking at designing a FIRS watch, and we have a design department of FIRS, and I work very closely with them on a daily basis, I often will come up with the idea. They will turn that into something that looks beautiful, but we'll be going backwards and forwards over all the little details, and I'll come on to why that is so important in a moment. But the fact is, we have to make a watch that can serve its function. I'm not someone who is going to make a watch that you can't read. For me, contrast, legibility, it's vitally important. Yes, if it's a dress watch that you wear once a year, it doesn't need to be the most legible watch. But still, you do actually want to, wearing a watch and it's not running feels wrong. Wearing a watch that you can't read also feels wrong. So for me, that is very important, it doesn't mean every watch has to have lots of lume, it has to have high contrast dials, but it means that you should be able to see it. And how that translates into details is why we do so much diamond polishing on applied indices, beveled hands. It's because as you move the watch around, the light catches it, so even in low light conditions, you can still see it, even though there's no lume.
You always try to create a 3D kind of perspective on every single dial.
Absolutely.
This is the thing that really stands out.
Absolutely, and this comes to the details. So something I've been saying to my team many, many times is, if someone walks into the room and they're stunning and everyone looks at them, it shouldn't be because of one thing. It shouldn't be because of their haircut, the clothes they're wearing, the glasses, how they look, their teeth. It should be the whole package. And for me, when it comes to a watch, which you wear against the skin, it's as intimate and personal as underwear. This is something that you wear, but unlike underwear, you are wearing this decade after decade.
Of course.
I certainly hope you're not wearing the underwear decade after decade. And so therefore, if you're taking up this very valuable real estate on someone's body, it can't be cold. It has to be something that has that bit of character. And what is character in a watch? Character is all those little details the little bits of extra finishing, the extra colour of printing, that at first you don't notice, but because it's there, it makes it warmer, it makes it a 3D object. And that's the thing, a watch is 3D. Too often, because of everyone's focusing on that pack shot, all important pack shot straight on, people think of a watch in 2D. But for me, it's why the moment you pick it up at Fairs, you know, looking at the Brunswicks we're wearing, they don't have a single flat surface on the case. Every single surface has at least one radius. And what does that mean? When it's on the wrist, it's very organic. You look at the dial's on different levels, different finishes, all those little details that they sound incredibly impressive, but they look fantastic.
Absolutely, and it's the dial in particular feels like a hidden gem within the timepiece as well. In terms of the case execution as well, it gives the idea, the perception of a value that is there. For us at the limited edition, of course, we try to be the ambassadors of the independence. We are lucky enough to work with a number of incredible watchmakers. Fairs is definitely up there for the value that, Nicholas, you've managed to propose at a price range that we can consider, you know, obviously approachable for independent watchmaking. And you're very proud of the amount of little details that you can offer at that price. Is there a collection where you think a collector not familiar yet with Fairs could focus to really understand the extent you've been going to achieve this richness within the product?
Certainly. I think, you know, if you're coming to Fairs fresh and you go, right, what's the watch that really highlights everything that I've been speaking about? I would say it would be one of the Salmon pieces, either in the Brunswick 38mm case, which is manual wind, small seconds, or the 40mm case, which is automatic central seconds. These two really showed off because of the metal coating on the dial. It really helped brings out the hand finishing. And you shouldn't look at it and it'd be like, oh my goodness, look at this, look at it. You should look at it and then just be kind of thinking, oh, look at that. And I mean, we've had emails from clients who have owned their watch over a year and suddenly saying, I was out walking the dog and I suddenly looked at my watch and the light hit it. They were just like, I've just got to say, this is so beautiful. I've been wearing this every day for a year and yet I still see new things in the watch. And I think that's particularly key. But I would say the Brunswick 38 and the Brunswick 40 Salmon are probably the best representative of all that Fairs detail. But even when you look at pieces like what's our simplest watch, our Brunswick 38mm white lacquer dial, you start looking at hand-polished white lacquer and it's mesmerizing. It's just not like white paint. It's got this depth to it, this liquidness to it. And I think this is the thing you mentioned, you know, the way we work to create a watch is we will be designing all the components and then we go to all the different manufacturers. So a good example, we get our crystals made by one of the best sapphire crystal manufacturers in Hong Kong. They're made bespoke to our specification. We get the seals made for it from another company. We receive those crystals in Bristol, we QC them, we then send them to Switzerland to have the anti-reflection coating done by the best AR coater in the industry. That AR coating actually costs 2.5 times the cost of the crystal. But why go to the effort of having a beautiful case and a stunning dial if you can't see it because of reflections? You know, it's those little things that no one should be buying it because of the AR coating, but because of the AR coating, you can see it and enjoy it. And so as a result, to build a watch, we're working with 20 or so different suppliers, which is a bit of a headache, but because we're working with the experts who make the best dials, the best cases, we're often the smallest company they will work with. They're working for a lot of the much bigger, the independents and some of the larger brands. What that means is we get to benefit from the technical expertise, the quality, the finishing. But as a small company, we get to be a bit of a pain because we come in wanting to do unusual things, changing things, low runs. But often because our suppliers are independent family run, so like ourselves, you have that bond, you have that connection. When you're sat in the room at the dial maker and the chap you're sat with is the 3rd generation, you have that connection. Yeah. And that's why we're lucky to be able to make a watch at the price we do. Whereas normally,
in control
exactly,
of every single process basically in the building, and you've added to that something that is quite, you know, it may sound like not a great deal to those that don't understand how tricky it is to bring back this trade of watchmaking actually in the UK, when most of the makers now, they don't technically make in the UK for obvious reason, because it is still an industry where just to develop a mechanical caliber, it can easily take 5 to 7 years, depending on the complexity. But you have even started a journey in that direction by doing your assembling already in the UK. So a mix of top-notch suppliers, and then everything brought under the same roof to be QC'd and to be assembled as well. How far you want to go with that, and how realistic it is for you to keep this affordable, you know, entry price level where the value you propose is much higher than what, you know, a client is asked to pay at the moment. I mean, that's my personal opinion, and I stand by it.
I mean, it's interesting because, you know, when you're running a business, you get to decide what direction you go. You know, how do I want this? How do I want Fears to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? How do I want it to be perceived? And what are the things that are the stakes in the ground? What are the things we won't change? For me, it's very important, as you mentioned, the quality control checks. You know, we could very easily just get the parts and just send everything off and get the watch assembled in Switzerland. A lot of people do. It's great. They've got great expertise. They know what they're doing. But the fact is, for me, it's going, I actually want to check all these parts from all these different suppliers myself. I want to make sure that they go through the Fears quality control checks, and we have very stringent checks. Why? It's my family's name on the dial. You know, and that's very important. You know, even though other members of the family don't have they don't own shares in the business, they're not part of the business, I've still got to look them in the eye at Christmas time and be like, no, actually, I've not disgraced the family name.
And they know the history. And
exactly.
I was going to ask you, sorry to interrupt, but how were things done back in those days, 150 years ago? Was everything done in the UK? How was it working at the time?
A real mix. So some watches were entirely made in the UK. Others, components were made in Switzerland and then brought in and assembled here. And I think this is the thing, we always tend to think of what was watchmaking like back in the 1950s, the 1900s. And there can be this confusion. People often think, well, every brand made everything themselves. That simply wasn't the case. That's a more recent phenomena. You know, you go back to the 50s in Switzerland, and, you know, most people were getting their eboches from, you know, Jägerle-Couture.
Yes.
Like, you know, that's where you got your movements from, and you got your cases made here and your dials. And that's why, you know, especially in the 60s, you look at certainly brands like Patek or Mars Vacheron, some of their watches are very similar. It's because it came from the same case maker, you know. And so it's the same with Fears. You know, if we look at British brands back in the 50s and 60s, not everything was made in Britain, and not everything, you know, was made in-house.
So it becomes even a more genuine and honest representation of what was going on here 150 years ago, as far as your family and your operations are concerned. So
exactly, and I think, you know, for me, I've always said, I'm very, very proud to be British. You know, I was born in Britain, I'm British through and through. But I won't reward bad behaviour. And what I mean by that is, if there's a supplier who, if I work with them, I get to say, oh, well, this part is made in Britain, but the quality isn't as good as getting a part made, say, in Germany, I'm sorry, I'm not going to use a faulty bad part, but get to wave the Union Jack. And people often think that's a bit confusing, because they're, no, you want to be striving to have, no, what I want to strive is to make the best watch possible. And where possible, we will work with British suppliers. But if they're not up to scratch, and if they're not willing to get up to that level, you know, we've worked with some suppliers and helped them improve, but if others aren't, no, for me, it's, you shouldn't have to compromise. You know, being made in Britain and being built in Britain are different things. Being made in Britain should only be if it is to the top quality. And, you know, recently I got asked, what do I think makes a watch company British? And for me, it needs to be headquartered in Britain, and it needs to be registered for tax in Britain. And, you know, if you're employing people, they're in Britain as well. You know, that's what helps benefit the British watch industry. because yes, we do need more watchmakers, 100%. But trust me, when we're looking to grow, you know, our operations team or our marketing team, there are very, very few people who have those skills from the watch industry in Britain today.
Of course, because the ecosystem is long gone.
Exactly.
And, only pioneers like yourself, like Garrick, like Rebecca Struders, like, you know, the Froshans of our world, they are taking this form of art back into the UK. So it must be not the easiest thing to find the right people.
I mean, I think this probably helps kind of put it all into sharp focus. If you're in Switzerland, there is a job role called Watch CEO. We see it, they move around the brands.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist in the UK. You know, the only watch brand that has a CEO who wasn't the founder would be Bremont. You know, that's the weird thing. When you look at it, as an industry, we really, you know, we've basically been going for about 20 years since the restart, you know, the real resurgence. And so for me, it's very important to not get too wrapped up in all these ideas. Everything has to be made. Yes, we'll get to that. But before that, I need to be able to grow my team and recruit people who have the skills to be able to do that.
And, you know, obviously not even the Swiss brands, you know, can claim at any given moment that everything is made in Switzerland. So I've always been a big, you know, supporter of the fact that for as long as a story is genuine and it's explained clearly, then, you know, there is beauty in every single business model, and there is
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, it's why back 7 years ago I did something which at the time seemed shocking. I did two things, but nowadays feels very right to me, and I'm glad I stuck to it. One of them was, firstly, to not gender our watches. We make watches.
Yep.
You know, if they suit your wrist and you like it, then it's for you. So we don't say men's collection, women's collection. It's
yeah, it feels anachronistic these days.
exactly. You know, we're not saying unisex. We're just saying it's a beautiful watch for men and women. The other thing was, from day one, is on our website, in our specification table, we list out where parts are made. You know, I'm not trying to hide, you know, if someone isn't going to buy it because, you know, the dial isn't made in Britain, that's absolutely fine. But what I don't want is someone buying it under false pretenses. You know, it's going, actually, look, let's build here and buy it for the right reasons. You know, it's the attention to detail, it's the quality control, it's making sure that, you know, we were talking about this earlier, that when you receive the watch, you know, we can back it up. You know, we have not just our service division, we also have a heritage division. So we offer restoration and servicing for Fears made prior to 1976. And the oldest watch we've restored is a pocket watch from 1868 that was actually made by Edwin Fear himself.
Which is amazing, because when I'm talking to the audience that is watching this, Fears was very consequential and relevant, of course, back in the days in terms of the volumes the sheer volumes they were producing. So you may, on your trip to London, you may encounter, you know, one of those historical pieces in your visit at Portobello, for example, or, you know, any flea market or auctions as well. So the possibility to fall onto one of the historical Fears pieces is definitely there, and you know there is a place here that can take care of that, and actually happens to be the headquarters of Fears today in Bristol. It's great to be live with Nicholas today, Fears from Bristol. If you're watching this, obviously recorded, you can put your comments or any questions you may have. Nicholas has many qualities, and one of them is very open about everything, really, and he loves interacting and responding to any question that may rise. I would end this interview, Nicholas, with a couple of questions. One is more business related, one is more personal. From the business perspective, is there any hidden secret that you can give us here on where Fears is going, the next developments on some of the collections that you are obviously supporting at the moment? From the aesthetic and from the mechanical point of view, your collaboration with Garrick was a big statement that you made.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if that is a hint to something else happening in the future. And then I'll go on the personal question next.
Okay, so to start with the first bit, so I think an important thing to realise with Fears is our watches are quite classic. That isn't the main defining point. The elegance, the understatement. That means that in the future you'll begin to see a few new families joining the Brunswick family, which lean more into the contemporary side of the Fears design language. I think it's important that it isn't, Fears isn't just saying, oh, well, we just make classic watches. No, we make elegant watches, but elegant can go down a classic route, but also a more contemporary route. And that means that we're not pigeonholed into this small little box. It's going, actually, there's all kinds of watches that you can have an elegant version of it or a non-elegant version. So that's something to sort of look out for in the future. When it comes to the Fears Garrick, I mean, it was one of those projects where we almost, I think on several occasions we kept thinking, is this ever going to be built? Is it ever going to come to fruition? Because we started work on it in November 2018 and then it launched in 2022. So nearly 4 years in the development. Would I want to see there being a Fears Garrick too? Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a true collaboration which allows both of us to step outside our comfort zone, but it's also a true collaboration because it's bringing two design languages together. I think that's something I would love to explore in a future piece. I mean, we mentioned earlier David Brailsford of Garrick Watch is one of my close personal friends. Yeah. So it's lovely to speak to him, several times a week. And so, yeah, I could see there being potentially something more. But maybe I should actually ask him first before I say that out loud.
Is it gonna inspire you in any way from, experimenting with moon phases, GMTs, or classic watch complications in the future? Have you thought about that, or is something not in the pipeline?
I think, I would like to see classic or more sort of romantic complications down in the Brunswick line, but then more contemporary complications go down in future other families, have this very clear. I like complications, but again, for me, they need to be useful. Yeah. They can be romantic, but they need to be useful. It's always comes back to this thing, it's not window dressing. It's still, I work in Bristol, I live in Yorkshire, it's still got to be, salt of the earth stuff.
Of course. On the last note, on a personal level, Nicholas, what do you enjoy the most within the Fears, endeavor? Is it the designing? Is it the managing? Is it, events and interact with people? If you have to single out one single thing that you enjoy the most.
So it sounds like I'm cheating here, but I would say the big thing is creating a company. For me, I enjoy all the different elements. I love designing new watches. And everyone here will joke, the moment we get a dial sample through, it's the most exciting thing in the world. And then, a prototype watch and then the final watch, I do love making things. I like creating things. I like making beautiful objects. But with that also comes, in recent years, I had to make a decision several years ago. Was Fears going to remain just myself, making less than 100 watches a year, or were we going to slowly build the company and grow it? And I took the decision to do the latter, to grow it. And, this immediately takes me out of my comfort zone. I've not grown a business before, but it's wonderful. And then it's wonderful employing people and seeing them develop and gain new skills and gain a passion for watches. For me, it's all of that. It's about creating a company and growing it. That is absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic. And on a last note, for those that would like to visit your headquarters, if they happen to be in Bristol, is there an opportunity for that?
Absolutely. We run on an appointment basis just because it's not a massive building, so we need to make sure it's not overfilled. But simply visiting the Fears website, you can book online an appointment. We're now open 6 days a week, including Saturday mornings. So if people are in Bristol coming down, drop us a line, book an appointment, come in, have a look at the collection, have a look at the archive, have a look around. It's a nice place to be in. Enjoy a cup of our own bespoke blend of Bristol breakfast tea as well.
As we are doing today. And thank you very much, Nicholas. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.